Good evening, everyone. I'm Sister Claire McGowan, Executive Director of New Pioneers for a Sustainable Future. It is Thursday night, December 5th, and for our television audience, I just want to point out that the weather outside is frightful. And all of the people who are here tonight are the bravest people in our area because they came out despite the weather. Our topic tonight is a little bit different from the topics that we've had before. It is the energy independence boom. And the way we're doing this conversation tonight is we have three guests who were present at a big meeting in Louisville on November 15th about the energy independence boom. And we've asked these folks if they would be willing to come and to share with us what they experienced during that day-long event, what they were interested by, what they were surprised by, what they maybe resisted, maybe what they questioned. So it's genuinely a conversation. And before we begin that conversation, I would like us to take a moment of silence, because I heard on the radio on the way over here this evening that one of the world's really great heroes, Nelson Mandela, died today. So let's just take a moment to honor the memory of this man who made an enormous difference, not only for South Africa, but for the whole world. Thank you, Nelson Mandela. So the background for this conversation is that in May of this year, 2013, we got the announcement that a major pipeline a company wanted to build a major pipeline through this area of central Kentucky. And then within 2 months, we heard that another major company wanted to convert a big pipeline that would run through Marion County along with many of the others. And so we began to ask a lot of questions about pipelines and what do they have to do with anything? Why do we need them, and how dangerous are they, and how much benefit will they be? And so we started to connect the dots and to learn a whole lot more about the stuff that's supposed to be carried through Kentucky, where it's coming from and where it's going to. And that's the whole story of hydraulic fracturing, or fracking as it's popularly called, and also the tar sands oil in Canada. So that's what we want to talk about tonight, are some of the implications of these new technologies that are telling us daily, if we watch the news, how wonderful it is that we now have all this cheap fossil fuel, natural gas and other substances that are going to be able to fuel us for the next 100 or 200 years. So if we listen to that and buy it, we think, wow, aren't we lucky that they're fracking all over the United States? But we want to ask some more questions about that tonight. So our guests tonight are my good friend, James Spraggins, who has recently become president of New Pioneers for Sustainable Futures Board. James is the manager of the Myrtle Dean Bed and Breakfast in Lebanon, Kentucky. And Ginny White-Shatsky, who is currently president of the Springfield Business and Professional Women, and grew up here in the county, has been off with a major professional job in other places, and has, in the last couple of years, come back and is bringing great gifts back into Washington County and the surrounding area. And our third guest is Dr. David Whitlock, pastor of the Lebanon Baptist Church, author of a column that appears weekly in our newspapers. You may have seen a recent column by him about the Festival of Faith Day that we're going to talk about tonight. So we have an excellent panel, and I think we're going to have an excellent conversation. Our structure, as always, is that each of our panelists will speak for about 10 minutes from their own perspective, and then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes of conversation among the panelists, and then we'll invite all of you to join into the conversation. So this is a learning process. It's all about trying to hear one another and understand more deeply what is going on with this issue in our world, and what can we, as people who care a lot about what happens to our grandchildren, what can we do to change that? So, James, would you like to begin?
Okay, I will do that. I will do that. This is sort of about the reaction of people of faith to some of the things going on and happening to our climate and our world, and in a mood of faith. I'll take your word for it that this is a great, at least for my part, a great third of it anyway. I have full confidence in the rest of my panelists. We went to November 15th. We went to Bellarmine University for the Festival of Faiths, and I know that you were getting nervous as the day drew near, but for the attendance. But when I walked in, it was a packed house, and I don't know how we could have shoehorned any more people in there. But it was it was informative. It was enthusiastic. And it was convivial, and that's kind of the way I've been to a few meetings of people talking about these issues, and for no good reason whatsoever, people are enthusiastic and even optimistic, because it's very dire things that are being discussed. I had some overarching reactions to it. There were 3 or 4 main speakers at the event who came from different backgrounds, authors, activists, a philanthropist, and you know, they all had something to say that taught me something. But there were some overall reactions that I had that it seems to me that in the last 20 years or more, there's sort of been this assumption that to claim yourself as a religious person or a person of faith is sort of you're sort of an adjunct of a type of politics that is right wing and reactionary in a way. Does not want to talk about issues concerning the environment for fear that it might offend big business. And sometimes I hear these people talking and I wonder, where does their faith lie? Does it lie in the Christian church or another faith tradition, or with the United States Chamber of Commerce? And so, but the group that met there in a large number certainly refuted that. That there are a lot of people who consider themselves just as much of faith and have some serious concerns about what we're doing to our planet and how we are imperiling our future and our children's future. And I think also maybe it signals a change in that there's a new boldness to speak about these things and say, you don't have total claim to the territory that you're trying to lay claim to, but these are people who are saying, hey, we're people of faith too, and we see it a different way, and they're speaking out and showing that there is some diversity of thought. But there was, we had several speakers. The first one was Sam Avery, who's written a book called The Pipeline and the Paradigm. And the pipeline he was specifically referring to was the Keystone XL. But it certainly is informative as we talk about the Bluegrass Pipeline here in Kentucky. Some of the thoughts I had is another thing that I think that we need to communicate is we're not the enemies of capitalism, but of short-sightedness. And I think too often what passes for capitalism is unfettered free markets and concentration on quarterly profits and short-term gain, rather than looking at what is going to be healthy for us in the future, and that ought to be very much an economic concern. We cannot only be about growth, GDP, and anything that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce says it needs, lest the world end. But Sam Avery, I thought, was a very powerful speaker, and some of the things that he alluded to, we're going to have to make some very, very hard choices, and I frankly can't see us in the current political climate and in the state in which this discussion often takes place. It's very hard for me to see us making the right choice. But how are we going to leave in the ground the carbon in its various forms, worth trillions of dollars, for the sake of, well, what we all know is more important, but it's going to, how are we going to get the entrenched moneyed interests to allow this to happen? Some of these, we would like to say that that we have power in our localities and all, but we do need the federal government. We do need Washington to take these things seriously. And he points out that in the ground is 3 to 5 times as much fossil fuel as we need to completely wreck the climate. And so you have that on one hand, and you have the money that it's worth, the trillions of dollars that it's worth on the other. And there are people who will deny what they have to deny to say, you know, we're not going to change things. We're going to stay the course. And you don't need to be a slave to exactitude. Yeah, I hear a lot of deniers who say, well, you know, you were wrong about such and such calculation when you said that this certain output was going to. You don't need to be, even if they're right by half. We should be very certain that we have a consequence staring us in the face and is telling us that we cannot continue down this road. And there's been an assumption that we aren't allowed to say these things and call ourselves people of faith. That and I just think that's, you know, obviously that's wrong, and these people were here to say it. We can talk about sustainability, and sustainability is, I guess by one definition, the possibility to continue. We're talking about finite resources in the ground. Just by taking them out of the ground, putting them in the air, we're flirting with disaster, and it's going to be a fight. And even people like you know, Bill McKibben, who spends every hour of every day fighting this, I don't sense that he's very optimistic. But on the other hand, what else do we have to do? You know. Can we really say that an energy policy that refuses to see the reality of finite resources, the human cost of carbon extraction, and the delayed debt to be paid by our children is conservative or even Christian? And this conference, by the way, was not a group exclusively of Christians. It was fairly diverse. And just because something's gone on for a period of time and we've managed to hide the costs and hide the evidence of the costs and the burdens from the willfully blind, is not to assume that we can continue. But we have to admit also that that this way of doing business, of consistent growth, has brought about some, you know, a great deal of prosperity, and few of us would want to do without the things that it's brought us. Even the people in this room, very few would want to do without a lot of the gifts that it's given us. But you have to also look at the problems that it's brought. And the people who were at that conference were there, I think, primarily to push back against the prevailing assumptions and the assumptions that we can continue to do what we're doing, and that even that there is this monolith of the church that thinks a certain way. And but like I say, there was a pushback. It was I thought it was rather convivial and joyful, and it was a nice place to be. There was comfort in the numbers, but there's no comfort in what we have to admit, that that the people that we traditionally like to demonize, the bad guys, the Exxons, the people who are in the coal, oil, gas industry, we like to demonize them, but they're not evil people. They're just people doing a job. And frankly, they're just doing what we want them to do. Every single one of us. So there's not, there's not a boogeyman that we would like to, that would make it easier for us to fight this fight. But there was also, as I would say, there was no easy grace offered. No simple-minded personal affirmation, which are some of the things that are hallmarks of a certain feel-good, self-help church that, frankly, is ascendant these days, that asks no hard questions and alludes to no responsibilities or any failures on our part. So it wasn't that we all left with a, patting ourselves on the back. We're just as much to blame as anybody, and we have a lot of work to do, and all we can do is do the work. Okay. Therefore, I shall end my I find that if you had a lot of uhs, it helps to take your time.
Thank you, James.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you very much.
Sure.